My name's Lana Klestoff. I am a customer success director here at Lucidworks. I've been in the search industry for, I guess, about 10 years now, and most recently, last 4 years or so, focusing on e-commerce, which is really why I'm here today. And really, I'm super, super pumped to be here. I am all about being able to create transformational experiences for you as well as your customers. And I think that Predictive Merchandiser is the product that, it's a game changer, honestly. Like I said, I've been in this space for quite some time, and I've seen that gap and that need for a product like this, really something that reduces tedious workflows for some of our technical folks in the room, something that gives business users the ability to understand performance data and metrics, right? But not only be able to analyze that, but also action on that immediately without having to rely on technology. How cool is that, right? Yes? Come on, guys. We're gonna be here for 2 hours. Let's make this fun. It's a commitment, 2 hours. You guys ready for this? No, crickets. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let's keep going. So, like I said, being able to reduce some of those workflows, being able to action on information immediately, really bridging that gap between business and technology. And I truly believe that Predictive Merchandiser is that product and is that solution for your teams. So let's talk a little bit about how we are going to spend the next couple of hours together. I thought first we could talk a little bit about the role of search and its importance within the customer journey, right? Then we'll talk about Fusion's Predictive Merchandiser. We'll dive into this concept of query or search rewriting, and then talk about each of those AI components. Last but not least, we'll dive into business rules. We still need the ability to not only use that really awesome, cool auto magic AI stuff, we also want to have the ability to drive toward business objectives and be able to manually do some things as well, right? We need to sleep at night. Sometimes it's not always just the AI that does it. And then last but not least, we will dive into the Predictive Merchandiser demo, and that's really where a lot of the cool stuff is going to be shown. How does that sound? Cool? Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, awesome. Okay, so a search platform. Actually, let me caveat this really quickly. So this conversation is going to be much more geared toward our business and our e-commerce folks in the room, so like merchandisers, as opposed to our more technical folks. We're gonna keep this pretty high level, but I am happy to have more conversations around the inner workings of Fusion and how this really works and relates to Fusion as a whole. There are gonna be similar concepts that you see between the two, so hopefully you guys, it resonates. But like I said, kind of more of a high level conversation. With that, how many merchandisers or business owners do we have in the room? Amazing. Oh, this is great. And then how many technical folks do we have in the room? And then how many Lucidworks folks do we have in the room? Awesome. Thanks for the support, guys. So let's talk about the role of search. It's a search platform essentially searches a chunk of information, right? So if we're talking about the e-commerce space and we're talking about all of your products, we want a customer to be able to, one, search on a given product or create a search, right, and identify that given product. We also want it to be smart enough to understand that intent. So we'll talk a little bit about those two and how we get there. And in a perfect world, that search platform, like I said, it's going to understand both that intent behind the search itself, as well as understand the query that has been executed, right? So what does that mean? It really means that we have set the bar extremely high when it comes to our search engines, especially as we're thinking about the likes of a Google platform. We want something that's efficient. We want something that's fast. We want it to find exactly what we're looking for and be able to do that quickly, when you're potentially commuting to and from work, bless you. etc. So we have little to no tolerance to end on a zero search results. Who likes zero search results pages? Anyone? What does that mean?
Lost revenue.
Lost revenue, totally. Potentially lost a person as well. I mean, both of those correlate to one another, right? But that customer might not think that you have the product that they're looking for and that maybe you just don't have it anymore. So where do they go? Maybe Amazon, maybe someone else, maybe a direct competitor. We want to do whatever we can to avoid those situations. So we do it in two ways. We streamline search, and we also increase successful queries or successful searches. With that, I'm going to open it up. I want some collaboration here and some commentary from you guys. But what makes a search unsuccessful to a point where you could end in a zero search result? Crickets. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Not having the metadata in the product catalog feed. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Chris. Okay. Yeah. That's getting a little in the weeds, Chris. So all of those things, but let me highlight a couple, right? So misspellings, oftentimes we're all working on our Apple iPhones or Androids or whatever we have these days. We might fat finger the word sweater, right? So for us humans, we understand what sweat tray means, but to a search engine, they may not be able to find that in a search index, right? Zero search results, hate it. Also, the understanding of synonyms. So we don't all speak that same language. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But understanding that pullover could also mean sweater. It could mean zippy, hoodie, whatever. Zippy, is that one? Zip up. And then also the understanding or being able to detect a phrase or just the intent of a given query that has been input. So, again, sorry. To make great search platforms, we need it to be smart enough to handle those unsuccessful query situations, be able to understand a user's intent or signals, behavior, all of that information, display those results prominently, right? We need those to be up at the very forefront of those results. Gets to the bottom of a page, people aren't interacting with it, right? And last but not least, it has to have the flexibility of being able to apply, those guardrails or those business rules when you need it. So here it is, folks. Predictive Merchandiser. This is going to be a game changer. It's got an easy to use interface, one of those two. You don't have to be technically inclined to be able to use this. You don't have to be a data scientist, although I know we all have our certificates now after the presentation yesterday. And it has this ease of use in terms of an interactive search capability, kind of like a simulator. And I guess let me get a raise of hands. How many people have had someone from higher up say, why does this dog bed be shown after I search for a swimsuit or whatever the situation might be, right? And oftentimes, are you able to explain why the reason is? Luke, you can? Yeah. Amazing. All right, we're doing well. Well, what Predictive Merchandiser will allow you to do is within this simulation, you can recreate that query and understand not only what AI components have been leveraged within that search execution, but also on the business side, any rules that may or may not have been applied to that given query. Make sense? It takes kind of this whole like black box idea and really opens up the doors so that you feel more confident, can sleep at night. And if your CEO comes banging on your door asking why there's a certain search result in a given query, you're able to address it quickly. Oops. So we've talked a little bit about bridging that gap between unsuccessful queries and being able to find that specific product. We do that through search rewriting to reflect the user's intent, but then also the ability to use those manual rules when we need to. So search rewriting, which is also query rewriting. What does that mean? In all instances, it's exactly what it sounds. It's being able to rewrite that query to understand that intent. We're doing that through detecting misspellings, synonyms, that phrase detection that we talked about. We're even being able to be proactive in this regard and provide potential corrections and suggestions that you then can enable in production without having to leverage your your technology teams. It's also using that signals behavior that we've been talking about. So who can answer what signals are? Does anyone know? Dale. User behavior. Awesome. Awesome. So in this example, we're going to use Jon Snow, who's a fan of Game of Thrones. Oh boy. All right, cool. Small amount in the room. Is that before or after this season? So Jon Snow, he has entered in a query for black sweater leggings. After that, he's actually faceted on that. But there's nothing else, right? We don't see any information about navigating to that product page. We don't have any information on him actually purchasing anything. So we may have lost him. He might have got distracted. We might have not shown the most relevant products for him, but really he knows nothing. Oh, corny, I know, gosh. I gotta do something. It's the afternoon on day 2, guys. Ladies, everyone. So let's talk a little bit about how we can improve Jon Snow's query. And I'm actually gonna take it to a bigger level, but let's talk about each of those core components first. So misspelling detection. This is a screenshot, and unfortunately it doesn't have the entirety of what you will see in Charles' demo. But this is the tabbed interface within Predictive Merchandiser specific to misspellings. It gives you not only the search term that was executed, but then also what it's been rewritten to. From there, what you don't see is a confidence level from 0 to 1, 0 being 0%, 1 being 100% super confident. We like to look at things, between that 80 to 90% of confidence level. And then you have the ability to action on that. Meaning, 1, you can auto-publish based off of a specific threshold or percentage, confidence level percentage. 2, you can go in and as you're getting more comfortable with Fusion and with Predictive Merchandiser, you can actually accept and approve that, publish it immediately, not having to rely on the technology teams. Or 2, you can reject it and say, this doesn't really make sense from a business perspective. And maybe we found this correlation, but we're not going to move forward with that just yet. So you'll see that very same interface as we go through each of these components. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the demo. So for the examples that we showed earlier, we've inverted the last 2 letters of sweater. And like I said, humans understand it. We need to make our engines smarter so that they understand it as well. So sweater is corrected, or sweat tray is corrected to sweater, and we're able to provide those results and hopefully get the person to convert, right? So let's talk about synonym detection. So in terms of synonym detection, this is an automatic detection in the sense of we're using an AI job, just as we do with misspellings, just as we do with phrase detection, to understand these correlations. So here we've got a search term that says clicker. It's rewritten to pointer. We also have that same level of confidence, 0 to 1, and the abilities to auto-publish, approve, or reject. So in this example, again, we're not all speaking the same language all the time, and I don't mean English versus Russian versus German, whatever. I'm just talking about specific concepts, and pullovers being something that someone might say when they're referring to a sweater that doesn't have buttons. So we want to be able to make that correlation again to find those results, give them to the person, and get them to convert. So phrase detection, very similar interface in this, also driven by an AI job. This allows you to understand the concept of multi-word queries or searches, right? And understand if there is a correlation between the two, and if those should be more prominently displayed when those 2 words or those 3 words are put and associated together. In the example that I have, sweater leggings. Okay, again, a human might know that sweater leggings might refer to like the sweater part of that might refer to the fabric. But if a search engine is seeing this without having any leverage of that AI or that intuition behind it, they might provide results for both sweaters as well as leggings. And there might be some sweater leggings mixed in there, but they might be at the bottom of the page. And does anyone ever go to the bottom of the page? The answer is not often, except for Jeremiah. He goes to the bottom of the page. All right, so let's talk about underperforming search rewriting. We also talk about this as query rewriting for those of you Fusion folks. So underperforming query rewriting is really understanding what a successful query term is versus unsuccessful or terms that have a lack of engagement, low clicks, low conversions, and being able to associate that with a successful term and rewrite that so that we can have an overall successful or head query. We want those clicks, we want that engagement, we want it to be relevant, and we also want to be able to provide, again, the most relevant results. That's redundant, I just said it. Oops, wrong way. So for this example, leggings, sweater, fabric, we want to associate that leggings might have a higher importance because that in and of itself is an actual higher head, more engaged, more successful term in its entirety. So rewriting that allows us to do that, make that association, and provide the most relevant results. Now, one thing to address before we move on to just kind of that overall corpus and go back up to the top of search rewriting is we do have the ability to manually enter for all of those components, right? So we have the ability to provide our own synonyms if we know it. We also might have misspellings that we know based off of business behavior, based off of knowing and understanding the way your customers are searching. And we might want to make that correction immediately without waiting for the AI job to run. So we can manually enter those, no problem, and still go through that exact same process of publishing it without having to worry about the technical teams. So a little bit of manual ability or levers, as well as marrying it with the AI and technology. So let's roll that back up to a much larger search for Jon Snow. So he's taken a step further and he has now searched for dark blue sweater, which is misspelled, tights, which could be synonymous with stockings, and then size med. So again, we all know size med, probably medium, right? I think that's a pretty good idea. Tights, like I said, could be synonymous with stockings, so we might want to make that correlation, and we might want to change and fix that misspelling. If we're able to compile every single one of those components and do that, we can rewrite this query so that Jon Snow can find exactly what he is looking for, and that's all without having to do a whole lot of manual intervention. How excited is everyone? Isn't that pretty cool? It's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. But let's talk about that manual intervention. I mean, sometimes we have sales, or we have Cyber Monday deals. We have, just the holiday season as a whole. There might be certain key objectives that we are trying to meet, and we want to be able to give you each the levers to be able to manually create rules to meet very specific business objectives. If we're talking about impacting average order value or your conversion rate, or maybe it's revenue per session, we have the ability to take these levers and do just that. So for the example of leggings, we can add a facet for size, we could add a facet for color, we could potentially even add a banner. I like to think about this in the example of boots during the winter season. You might want to provide an educational or inspirational opportunity and create a banner that takes you, navigates you through the customer journey and talks to you a little bit more about the right fit for a boot or the right fit for the terrain that you're in. It's all about that real transformational customer experience, and we want to be able to provide that very quickly and easily. Removing out of stock items, so the idea of blocking specific items at an inventory level when it's 0, as well as being able to bury. So there are 3 key components to creating a rule. We've got general, the condition, and the action. And in terms of the general, what we're looking for here is just the way in which we're naming the the rule, right? We might want to add a description. If we've got 1 or more merchandisers on the team, you might want to be able to provide some level of description as to why that rule was created. And we've got this concept of rule group or tags to be able to categorize and facet off of that given, within that given instance, really, so you're able to identify the rules that you're looking for, make changes if necessary, delete if necessary, etc. But most importantly here is the priority level, because one thing we need to understand is order of operations, right? So if we have that query of leggings, we need to be able to understand that there might be multiple business rules that are associated to that query or that search, right? And we need to be able to prioritize those and be able to identify what we want to apply first before we move on. So that's what the priority level is. The condition is the meat of it, right? So that's the query, and I'm not talking about a SQL query that needs to be written. I'm just talking about the actual search term or multi-word search, whatever it might be. Dates. We have the ability to either apply dates or also be flexible and say, this is something that we want in perpetuity. Field value, as well as remove the blank, sorry. But let's talk about the actions a little bit more. So when we're talking about boosting, we're bringing products up based off of a specific attribute to the top of the results page. That could be because Oprah just talked about how obsessed she is with Align crops, and we want to make sure that Aligns come to the entire search experience. When it comes to a banner, we kind of already talked about that concept. Burying should not be confused with blocking. Burying downranks that product, so it buries it to the bottom of the page, not to be redundant. But blocking is actually going to remove that from the search results. We also have the ability to set facets, set params, filter, do things like redirects. So if we think about wanting to redirect to a product landing page or a product listing page, I should say, or even like searching for gift cards and you want to provide a very unique experience to being able to purchase and find gift cards for your friends or family. So at this point, I think I might have gone a little bit too fast. Oh no. Oh yeah, definitely too fast. Let's talk through the concepts that we discussed. So we talked about the role of search and its importance, right? We've talked about Fusion's Predictive Merchandiser and the role it has in streamlining that search experience. We've also analyzed query rewrites. We've talked about each of those AI components. And last but not least, we've talked about how we can also pull some levers and be able to leverage manual rules to meet key objectives. How's everyone feeling so far? Do we feel like you can use the product? You haven't even seen it yet, but do you feel like you can use it? Yes. Sweet, that's the right answer. So I am early, which means that we will get out a little bit early. So instead of taking a break, are you guys okay with rolling through and seeing the demo? Yes. Amazing, and my voice lasted. So Charles, it's all you.
Do we want to bother with a mic, or should I just talk?
Use the mic.
Use the mic?
It's on the table.
Okay. I'll have to put it down periodically to type, but...
So this predictive merchandiser isn't domain specific. It's got like behavior, like how do you understand the intent if it's different?
Right. So the question is this predictive merchandiser products specific to retail and e-commerce? And the answer is no. Like that's the kind of the first use case that we're targeting, which is why we're showing a lot of e-commerce examples. But these tools, techniques could still be applied to data regardless, right? It could be documents, could be people that you're searching for, could be clinical trials, anything, right? The same techniques will still be useful in those contexts. Yeah, sure. Okay. All right, so as Lana mentioned, the whole purpose of this tool really is to provide an intuitive user interface for non-technical users, people like merchandisers, to be able to curate both the search and browse experiences. So we still want to leverage the benefits of automation through the things that she mentioned, like misspellings, synonyms, and things like that. But ultimately, we want to give the merchandisers the ultimate authority over what products should show up in relation to what queries and what browse pages and things like that, right? Is the resolution a bit bad? I can try. Give me just 1 second. Better?
That's better.
Okay. All right, so this is a predictive merchandiser. This is a back-end tool for your merchandisers to, again, curate that search and browse experience. So we've got some examples here. I'm going to type in, this is a wearable electronics data set, so you're going to see a lot of watches and heart rate monitors and things like that. I'm going to search for a generic term, something like camera. And we can preview essentially what results are going to get returned as a result of that search. We have the nice graphical display. We can see the product image. We see potentially whatever fields have been exposed. I think some other examples. We'll see the price. We see the manufacturer. Whatever fields are relevant to your data set, we can configure and display them here. This is just a fairly basic example. So in this scenario, you'll notice that the first result in this search for camera technically is a camera, but it's actually a camera hidden in a pair of eyeglasses. So it's technically relevant, but probably not the first thing that you would want to show up when you search for a generic term like camera. So as a merchandiser, I can now leverage the tools that were mentioned by Lana, one of which we could block the product, meaning I don't want this product to show up when people search for camera at all. I don't think it's relevant. Or we could rather bury the product. So I still think it's relevant. I really just don't want it to show up on the first page, right? Well, we want to find some other things first. So I click that bury link, and a rule is defined within the tool to say, yes, we want to bury that product in relation to the search, and you'll notice that we don't see that product show up now on that first page. So it's a fairly simple example about how you would curate the search experience, but of course, not all customers search. Some people don't actually like to type, right? They are mouse-only users. So they're going to browse, they're going to navigate instead. So we can still curate that experience as well. So if I back out of there, I'm going to navigate to the fitness category, and maybe I navigate to a subcategory as well. Again, these are all wearable electronics. So I'm going to select items that would fit on my wrist. So in this case, there is no search term. I didn't type anything. I've just browsed a particular category page, but I still have the ability to merchandise that experience, to curate that experience. So in this example, maybe the third result, I really want that to be the first because I feel like that's probably our best-selling product in that particular category, or something along those lines. I can simply drag and drop that product into the first position. And again, the rule is created so that now, regardless of anything else within the system, when a user navigates to this particular product page or a category page, we're going to see that result in position 1, regardless, right? Again, we see the product rule show up on the upper left. We can edit that product rule if necessary. So we have a little wizard here where we can come in and change the rule name if we want to assign the rule to a specific group. So if you want to group rules by events like Black Friday or Cyber Monday. You can do that there. It's for kind of easy categorization. And then also assign a priority if you're worried about rules firing in different orders. Anytime you're in this rule editing wizard, if you're a little confused as to what products am I actually affecting here, we have a view where we can see the list of products that this rule actually applies. So it gives you, again, a visual indicator there, so we don't have to remember SKU numbers and product numbers off the top of our head. Okay. So drag and drop is great when you're on a particular page. However, there are examples. Another example I can show you. So let's navigate to a different product page, or a rather different category. I'm going to go to the lifecycle category. And the drag and drop example was cool. Was cool and very easy. If you're dragging result 3 to result 1. But what happens if you're looking for a product to drag and drop, but it's on a completely different page, right? And maybe you have 10 pages, or maybe you have 100 pages of results. You shouldn't have to go through each page individually to find the product that you want to pin to the top spot. So what we can do in that scenario instead is to insert a product at a particular position within the results. So I can say insert at position 1, and then we'll bring up a separate search screen where you can now find the product, which should actually come up in spot 1. And you could potentially search across your entire product assortment. So if you really wanted to, on the wristwatch category, you could show a toaster if you really wanted to, right? So ultimately, the merchandisers have ultimate control over kind of what's going to show up, on that first page, because they should know the best as to which products are relevant, right? So in this case, I'll search for like a particular Sony watch. We'll take this black smartwatch here, and I click Insert. And now that product will be pinned to position 1 anytime anyone navigates to the lifestyle page within our catalog. Okay. So as these rules are getting created, right, different rules are going to fire for different scenarios. We can always get a list of rules. So if I come to the rules view here, right, we can see which rules have been created. We can edit them from the screen here. We can sort them by their category or their tag. So again, if you have rules and you want to organize them by Black Friday or holiday, that type of thing, we can do that here. Something else which Liz mentioned was the ability to specify a date range. So for a given rule, I only want this rule to apply or to be invoked from, a certain date to another date. So only for the month of November, or only during a certain season, for example. I've heard problems in other solutions where it's very easy to create rules, but sometimes you forget to go and delete them later. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
If you're pinning something, do you have in those rule editors where you can badge it that it's like a featured or a sponsored, or do you have some reason as to why you're pinning it?
That would be a great feature request for Liz in the back. She's our product owner. She's now ducking away. But yeah, so this is the first release. There's a lot of features and quality of life updates that we're going to add to it. We have new releases coming every 6 weeks. So by no means is it perfect in its present form, but we have a lot of additional features that we're going to add, such as that one. Yep.
And we can reach out to you and have the conversation around doing that kind of stuff and bringing it in. So anything that running through the beta programs as well is the ability to take this feedback, put it in, have the conversation around, do we want to actually product test this as well or not? So that was.
Yeah. Sure.
Wait, so does pinning mean you're actually adding it to the result set, or that you are only shoving it to the top of the result set?
Either or. So it doesn't even have to come up in the original result set in order for you to be able to pin it to the first result. If it's there already, then you're moving it up. But I believe you can grab any product regardless of whether it was actually returned or not.
Yeah.
From date to date, does that include time?
I don't think it does presently. I think right now it's just restricted to day. But if you would like to, again, that's a product enhancement that we're more than willing to look at. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yep.
What's the relation between this and signals? If you were to vary something, for example, is that sort of anchoring it to a certain point, and therefore, when customers start, they decide that that's actually a relevant result, and so they were acting on that and seeking it out, would that override variance?
It influences, right? So it's effectively, not to get too technical, but we can if we need to. Bury is more or less a negative boost. So whatever your solar score for that document is, and on top of that, whatever signal score you have on top of that, bury is just going to essentially apply a negative boost to that value, and it'll be subtracted as such, right? That makes sense. It's not gonna physically change like the solar score, but it will change the order that the results are getting returned. So effectively, it's changing, the score, if you will. Yeah.
More of an override.
Say again?
It's more of an override on the
Right. Yep.
follow-up question on that.
Sure.
So does this apply after the actual document scores calculation done, or this is before that?
So, I think technically it's calculated first. The boost is essentially kind of derived first and then passed to solar. But effectively, it's going to override, to a certain degree, whatever the solar score was. Yeah. Yeah, it's a boost. Pin, I'm not too sure on. Maybe Josh can answer that. For boost and bury, you're just essentially adding a boost parameter to your query and either applying a positive or negative boost for a boost would be a traditional boost versus a bury would be a boost with a negative value. Yep.
So if we pin the first item in the list and then go and do the boost on the second, then which takes precedence because you're kind of contradicting yourself in a sense, right?
Right, yeah. So pin should always take priority over boost. So if you pin something to spot 1, it doesn't matter what the solar score is or what signals you have on result number 2. It will never kind of shift number 1 out of the way, if that makes sense. Yep. Oh, sorry, I should be repeating the question. They're kind of rapid fire, though. Josh?
So with burying and negative boosting, solar doesn't actually do negative boosts, but what we've done what we do is we'll do like a decimal point boost. So as you add to the boost score or the boost query or something, what will happen is we'll put like a 0.1 or something like that, which will then allow for that negative boost because the signals are going to come into play as it's going to affect the relevancy score, but then by adding that 0.1 multiplier, it's going to reduce the score immensely to allow for that varying action to be actually.
Yep, exactly. Yep, thanks, Josh. Sorry? The tool? Correct, yeah. So let me back out here. So yeah, so this tool is intended as kind of like a back-end tool for your merchandisers. It's going to affect the experience of your customers on your front-end UI, whether it's at your .com or whatever. Sorry, was that the?
Yeah, front end is what, like as page, dynamic page, something.
Well, so the idea,
Use case you are trying to
right, so the,
search results is against the search term.
right.
This is not happening against the search term, but working on category.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So the first example I showed was using a search term, right? The second and third examples I showed, there was no search term. Instead, really what you're selecting is a filter or a facet, which is functionally the same as the users on the front-end site, and they navigate to a particular product category. Like I'm interested in wearables, and I'm looking for items on my wrist. So yes, they didn't type anything, but they did select a filter, and we can still curate that experience even though there was no explicit search term. Right. Okay. So as Lana was mentioning earlier, on the back end, there's usually a number of automatic misspelling, rewrites, synonym detections, and so on and so forth. Coming from the machine learning models that are included with Fusion, and it's important to know as a merchandiser, which rules are firing so that we can explain. If I type in a given term, I have some idea of why certain products are showing up versus others. So I've got some examples we can show you there. So, around misspellings, I can type in a misspelling of Casio, the brand. I'll use an E, and we can see there is a spell detection rule which is occurring on the back end to rewrite Casio with an E to Casio with an I, right? And that one's pretty straightforward. That one makes sense. I can use some other examples here. I'll put in step counter. And we'll see that there is a synonym rewrite that's occurring on the back end to include not only results for step counter, but also pedometer. So again, that might explain, okay, if someone is asking, why am I seeing pedometer show up? Well, that would explain why. That rule is going to tell you that. Other examples, right? We can do something like heart rate monitor. Right? In this case, we are detecting heart rate monitor as a phrase, right? The customer is not searching for a computer monitor. They're not looking to buy a human heart, right? It's a single concept heart rate monitor. It should be treated as such. That's how we're going to get better results, right? Than treating those terms individually. So if we want, we can go back and view, again, the entire list of search rewrites. This particular project, I created all these by hand, but I can show you another project where we see a list of these that were generated automatically, leveraging the machine learning models that are included with Fusion. So this is a different product set. We have quite a few more products. We have roughly 1 million products. We had a lot of signals around this particular product set. So here you can see we have 94,000 search rewrites. Again, misspelling, synonyms, so forth. Believe me, I did not create these by hand. It would have taken me years to do so. These were automatically defined. As Lana mentioned, normally you would see a confidence level next to each one, so we can automatically approve search rewrites that are above a certain confidence threshold, and then for others, we can have our merchandisers come in and either manually deny them, maybe edit them and improve them, maybe they need to be tweaked a little bit, right? We can come in and edit those directly here.
Are those rewrites always one-to-one?
In the sense that, like, when you, okay, so the question.
Your search, sorry, in this case, your search term, there's always only one search term.
Sure, sure,
Phrase, right?
right.
But the reality is, like your pullover sweater example, like maybe there's like, I don't know, there's a bunch of other ways that you could say pullover
Sure,
sweater,
sure.
and they would all end at the same term in our data set.
Right.
Does that end up being like 10 rewrite rules, or is it like one rewrite rule where basically you have 10 things on the left side of the
Right. So
These all end up being 3 times synonyms? Is that's
yeah, I mean, so for synonyms, you can very easily just specify bidirectional, and you can put as many as you want on either side, and it will translate. For right now, for example, for like the head tail rewrite, I think it is a kind of one-to-many. You could include many on the second side if you wish, but that might be something we would look into as a future feature. Would be essentially to kind of simplify the rule editing process, so you don't have 8 rules that all kind of map to the same thing. You could just have one rule with a many-to-one or a many-to-many, as the case might be, right? Okay. Sure.
But you can't. So you were saying though that you could have. So an example for our business is rain gear.
Okay.
People search for rain gear. Well, that could mean that includes rain jackets and rain pants and rain boots and umbrellas.
Sure.
So how would that rewrite? Would that rewrite be represented somehow?
Yeah, so that sounds more like a synonym, right? Where basically we want to basically take a singular term and expand it out to include multiple other things and give you everything. So if we go to the search rewrite in my wearables collection, if we look at the one for step counter, right? I can specify step counter and then specify the synonyms for that: step counter, pedometer, and you can make that bidirectional so that if someone typed in pedometer, we also want to include step counter and vice versa. So that's the one way where you can kind of specify a one-to-many, if you will, or even a many-to-many, as the case might be. But yeah. So it works for synonyms as is, but for other types, we might have to examine that for the future.
If people are pinning everything and moving things around all the time, and say it's a big category and there were like 10 people working on it, I mean, is it like item by item by item by item, and then this query performance will go down at some point?
I haven't personally done any studies around query performance of pinning, more than X products. I would think, most first pages only contain, 6 to 10 results. And sorry, the question for anyone who didn't hear it was, what happens if you start pinning 100 products for a given search? Is that going to affect query performance? Okay, right. So yes, it does. I think, when you're dealing with the first page, right, you're dealing with what, a maximum of like 12.
This basically a join list affects the whole thing in one go, so it's pretty.
Right.
So we're not going like end to the passage for
Sure.
And it's actually becoming a problem the way there's things in solar that you can do from an architecture standpoint to actually increase shard out and add more nodes or something, especially with Fusion 5 and the auto scaling features that will allow it to do that kind of stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Okay.
Crystal, you had a question.
Yeah, are there user roles where it talks about like publishing them and approving them, so it can be a queue of ones, someone needs to go through and actually
Sure.
publish
Sure.
them.
Sure.
Suggested, I guess.
Yep. That's the idea. We have some minimal features around that now, but I think that's the eventual goal is to essentially define your roles, allow people to be working on kind of independent projects, and then either publish those changes together or not. Right. That's the idea. Yep.
Let's say we have these rules to be applied to a different, we have a client who have a similar kind of catalog. So similar rules can apply to different clients. We have different collections for each client. So do we have to define these rules? I saw like 9,000 plus rules for your store.
Sure.
Do we have to like copy it over? Is there a like import export?
Yeah, there's a built-in way to essentially copy index data from one collection to another. So if you've built up a very large collection of query rewrites like this one that has 95,000, there is a way to very easily and very quickly copy those into a separate collection that would be leveraged for another customer or your French site or something else, right?
It's one of the out-of-the-box Spark jobs now.
Right.
So there's a collection transfer Spark job that will actually go in.
Okay. All right. I think one additional thing I can show is our kind of analytics. So again, this is by no means the end product. This is a good start. We're going to add additional information here. So as a merchandiser, I can see kind of site visits over time. So I can find peaks in popularity or traffic, top search terms, top clicked products, trending searches. This one I think is probably pretty interesting. Top null searches, right? So what searches have users run recently that return nothing, right? Because again, if we see that 100 people search for a term today and we return nothing, that's lost revenue, lost opportunity. So maybe we can go correct for that. We can implement a synonym. And maybe there's a misspelling that we can identify to correct for that, right? Yeah, so again, summary, ultimately, again, a tool for non-technical users to be able to curate, search, and browse, right? Okay.
Any other questions?
So in all your synonym examples, when I talk about stemming, how like the what was it for my camera? You showed like a rule for camera, right? But what if they search for cameras?
Right.
And same with the synonyms, like step through, counter, pedometer would be pedometers.
Sure. So I know Solar has some built-in stemming technology around traditional English words. As far as dealing with kind of custom, domain-specific terminology.
Specifically, so
Right.
there was a rule
Right.
created for a search for the term camera.
Right.
If the user searches for the term cameras,
Right.
would that rule trigger?
Yeah, so maybe Bjarki or somebody else who maybe has a little more familiar on how we would implement domain-specific stems, word stems, right? I think maybe we did. Yeah, we can take that offline. Yeah, I would think that would be customization at this whole level, but yeah, we can take it
Let's
offline.
take it at a higher level. So that rule was a search for the term camera.
Right.
Could the merchandiser have an or in that set of triggers? So a search for camera or camcorders or whatever.
Yes. So if you wanted to explicitly identify when you're defining that rule, you can specify this or that or this plus that or and or whatever terminology you want to leverage there. Yes. Yep. Like regex. We can do that within the query pipeline. So once we got the search into Fusion, the query's running, we can use regular expressions. Right. Right. Sure. Right. Sure. Yeah. So we could do essentially regular expression matching prior to the rule stage, and then run the rule, and the rule will then run on the result of whatever regular expression you'd have applied. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
What if user navigates to cameras and I have the same thing happen whether they navigate or they search?
Or they browse. Yes, presently you'd essentially have to set up the same pin rule twice, but in the future we could look at maybe consolidating that workflow. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is there a way for merchandisers to test the rules that they apply?
Yeah, so that's kind of the purpose of this first screen here, is that I can, if I go create a rule, I can come to a screen, so if we create a rule for like camera like we saw before, I can see what rules are firing. If I go into interactive mode, we can see what rules are firing in what order, and then I can delete or reprioritize as necessary.
Are you asking about testing in terms of performance? Yeah. So I believe that we will be able to do that from like an A/B testing perspective or multivariate perspective.
Okay, so you're saying like experiments, right? Like
Yeah,
A/B testing,
experiments.
right. Yes, yeah. So that's built into Fusion, right? So if you want to set up, different scenarios, you want to test them, 50% of the traffic here, 50% of the traffic there, and then measure click-through rate or add to cart or purchase. Yeah, that's a built-in aspect of Fusion.
And also, all of this is API based too. So if you wanted to do like stress testing, JMeter style testing, hitting these endpoints is basically the same as us running a search on this page, as opposed to running it through with 1,000 requests a second or something like that.
Yeah.
Question over here.
I'm just going to ask if you have the ability to search for something like what a grid wall will look like in the future. I don't want to search for camera, but I know 2 weeks from now we're going to have.
That's a great idea, right? So if you have rules that are applying only to a specific date range, being able to say, okay, I want to emulate as if this were now November, what would I get, right? Yeah, I don't think that's in presently, but it's definitely something that we're looking at adding. Yep.
So another quick question on that. What if the thing that you want to in isn't in the current catalog?
Right, in the current catalog, or just isn't being returned as a part of your search.
Isn't in the
catalog?
like a new product.
On the site now, but when the sale starts, it will be on the site.
Sure. Yeah, I would think you would at least need a skeleton kind of placeholder for that product. Even if you didn't have all the detail around it in the image, you would need some type of skeleton that you would need to essentially add to be able to create a rule around that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Chris, you had another question?
Well, so I have a question because we happen to have nested categories. Items can appear in many different categories.
Sure.
So, I mean, a feature that I would suggest is sort of a super or a super boost where
Sure.
it would say just for every category that this item appears in, just put it at the top.
Sure.
And obviously, it would take some time to then go through and verify or whatever, but it could be useful.
Okay. Yeah, I'll
Sure.
be sure to give that one to Liz as well. Yeah. Yep. All right.
Crystal?
Manual redirects in our CMS today,
Mhm.
so kind of overriding a lot of these. Would we be able to import that in here so we can kind of see all these rules at the same time?
Yeah, sure. If you have existing rules and something else, we can definitely import those rules so you don't have to recreate them by hand. We've had a number of customers we've done that for. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Who's excited? Yeah, I got 2 hands back there. Amazing. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate you coming.